more love, more joy, everything.
It's inspired young people.
Inspiration comes from within you. When you clear out the garbage that's in your mind, you then create space for something better, more beautiful to come in.
Let's have life and have it more abundantly.
I say yes.
It's like taking a workshop. I get to be in my pajamas.
We have a very active imagination, which is why it's important to learn how to harness it and then point it in the direction you want to go.
I listen to your show every day.
It's time now for Living Your Inspired Life with Susan Burrell. Susan is no-nonsense, inspirational, motivational, and fun.
This is positive talk radio.
Practical wisdom for everyday life.
It's a gift you give yourself.
Now, here's Susan.
And welcome to Living Your Inspired Life. You're listening to News Talk 1590 KVTA. And I'm just going to tell you at the get-go, if you are just now tuning in to our show, I invite you to go to the website, livingyourinspiredlife.org, and listen to all the amazing conversations and stuff that we've been doing over the last few years, because I'm pretty proud of the work that we do here on Living Your Inspired Life. So the website is livingyourinspiredlife.org. And we archive all our radio shows. So in fact, my guest that I'm having on today was on our show a couple years ago, and you can go and listen to that interview later if you want, after you listen to this one. So I want to just welcome back Dr. Judith Orloff.
Thank you. I'm happy to be on your show.
I'm happy to have you, and it's interesting. So I just am going to share this with you. The book that we're going to be talking about is your latest book called The Power of Surrender. Let Go and Energize Your Relationships, Success, and Well-Being. And personally, over the last several weeks, I've been working with this idea of surrender, Dr. Orloff, and we've talked about it on Living Your Inspired Life. So it's such a perfect timing for you to show up. I love it.
Oh, yeah. Surrender is such an important missing piece to living life well and living life positively, because if you try and control every little detail of your life, it's not tapping into the flow of your life or being in the now. So it's key to be able to learn when to let go and surrender, and to know when to move forward and, be more assertive.
Well, and it's interesting because I had to look up the definition of surrender, and you say that surrender is a very positive thing, but in one of the definitions I found, it was all about yielding, relinquishing, letting go and giving yourself over to somebody else or something else, and it doesn't sound very fun.
Well, no, that's the old definition, and it doesn't really apply to what I'm talking about. I'm talking about surrender as a really positive way of living life. It doesn't mean giving up anything that is not good for you, that is good for you at all. It's about giving up things that aren't working for you, your fear, your lack of self-esteem, and surrendering those, letting go of those, and letting go into, more positive relationships, love, success, but being able to give yourself fully to both. It's living life in the moment. It's living life fully. And surrender is about learning how to intuitively tap into a flow. And when you're living in the flow, all kinds of magical things can happen to you. Synchronicities, deja vu, all kinds of opportunities can come, versus when you're trying to overthink your life or try and force things. It's not as magical, and it's very exhausting.
It's really exhausting. And,
yeah.
and in fact, you said in your book, The Power of Surrender, there are so many clenchings that happen to us each day and throughout a lifetime that we end up shouldering chronic tension. And that spoke to me, because I have been clenching, holding on really tight with both hands, and my shoulders are always up around my ears. And that's just the physical experience. But the tension and the stress that I cause myself is ridiculous. And I think a lot of people live life that way.
Oh, yes. I mean, I'm a psychiatrist in Los Angeles with a private practice, and so many of my patients, come to me because they're exhausted, or they have an energy crash, or they've been trying so hard, but they've been wearing themselves out, and they wanted an alternative approach. And so this is where surrender can come in, but you have to know what to surrender to that's positive, and how to let go of old patterns that aren't working for you that cause the clenching.
Well, can we work with this idea? Because you said to surrender, giving up fear and lack of self-esteem. Could we work with that idea of surrendering your lack of self-esteem? Because how do you do that? Because that just feels like lack of self-esteem for many people is just kind of the way of life.
Yes, but it doesn't have to be, because each one of us is perfect and amazing and beautiful. Anything that you think less than that of yourself is not accurate. See, so you're basically all of that, and tuning into that and really believing in your own potential and your own capabilities and your own quality of heart, and how much you can give to life. That needs to be a source of self-esteem. I think the problem is, especially in a lot of the patients I treat who are in Hollywood, and they put their self-esteem contingent on their bank account and their job. And what happens, of course, since nothing is ever permanent, is when you lose the job, or when you age to a point where you just leave the job, then what are you left with? It's really kind of sad, because you have to connect to yourself and develop a kind of self-esteem that's based on liking yourself. And to me, self-esteem and what makes a beautiful person is how much they give and how much they can be kind to themselves and on a spiritual path, growing and loving and failing and succeeding, and everything you do on your show. It's about being honest, as you're so honest, in expressing your tension and your stress and your clenching. And how do you heal that? To gain a tremendous amount of self-esteem from your soul growth. That's what the power of surrender is all about. But you have to know what to let go of in terms of your fears, and what to embrace in terms of your affirmations and who you are. And everybody has negative thoughts going on in their head all the time. I know that I've had the honor of sitting across from people as a psychiatrist for over 20 years, and I know what goes on in people's heads. And the healing is to let go of those negative voices and substitute them more with positive voices and hope, and humility, and valuing how you can be of service to others is a great source of self-esteem.
Well, and one of the things you say in your book, The Power of Surrender, is by knowing when to assert yourself and when to let go, you're actually taking back control of your life. And I think so many of us, like you said just a few minutes ago, we're hanging on so tightly, trying to control, that we don't realize we've spun out of control.
Exactly, and you become your worst enemy. I've treated so many people and patients who just try too hard to make things happen, and things don't happen when you push when the door isn't ready to be opened. And it's just a basic life truth to be able to know when to back off and when to move forward. And if a door isn't opening, no matter how hard you try, you have to stop, because otherwise you're hurting yourself and you're not getting anywhere, and you're alienating people.
Right. So then do you just, so Dr. Orloff, if you hit the wall, if you've hit this door and it's not opening, then do you just sit outside the door like an obedient puppy and wait until somebody opens it for you? Or do you, what do you do?
No. Life is very magical. What you do is that you take a few steps back and you regroup in your deepest self and listen to your intuition. And you have to tune in to whether or not now is the right timing for this door to open, or is it simply I want what I want when I want it, which is a whole other thing. Mm-hmm. And you might get intuitively, wait 2 months and then return to this scenario. Try and pitch this screenplay in 2 months, or try and apply for this job in 6 months. But wait right now. Stop pushing and wait and regroup and tune in to see if there are other opportunities as well. So it's really tapping into a supreme intelligence within yourself, tapping into intuition. That's what the workshop at the Center for the Heart is on November 7th that I'm giving, is what do you do when you've pushed and tried and it's not happening now? It's not happening now. How do you tune into your intuition? How do you listen to your deepest self as to know what to do instead of just batting your head against the wall?
Well, it
So
sounds like I appreciate the idea of stepping back and then asking within and listening, but
Yeah.
but also, like for me, like you said, I want what I want when I want it. Hello, but if I step back, when I step back, and I can listen within, sometimes I don't necessarily want to wait 2 more months, or I don't want to necessarily do what my inner voice is telling me to do. So how do you deal with that? Because and I guess I'm speaking about the fear that wraps around people when they think they want the thing they want. And usually you fight so hard for that thing that I think I want because I'm afraid if I don't get it, I'll have whatever it is. I'll have nothing, or I'll be stuck, or whatever.
Right, but you definitely have nothing if you keep pushing.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's ego. You're pushing from a sense of ego and what you want rather than what the flow is in life. There's, as one matures, they realize that there's a flow in life and that it's just smart to hitch a ride to that flow and to sense where you're going. And you could direct the flow sometimes, but the flow has to be there. You can't make something out of nothing.
Right.
If you're not meant to have this relationship, no matter how much you're attracted to the person and how much you feel that this person is your soulmate, if it's not meant to happen, it's not going to happen, no matter how much you want it. And so you have to go on to somebody who can love you and someone who you can connect with. That type of thing, or you can, live your life the next 30 years bemoaning the fact that your love never came through for you, which is not a good scenario. If something isn't happening, it's interesting. I like to say, if the universe can say yes to you, or the universe can say maybe, not now, or the universe can say, no, I love you so much, I'm not giving you this.
Mm. And it's important that we get that really is what the no is, because so many people take that as a slap in the face or a failure.
Right. No, it's if you don't get something you supposedly want so badly, look at it that way, that the universe loves you so much, they're not giving you this. And you might not see it at this very moment, but in retrospect, in my life, when I've been in that mode of wanting and why aren't I getting what I want, when I look back, it always works out.
It sure does, doesn't it?
Yeah, it really, really does. You might not see it in the moment, but that's where hope and faith come in. And how do you really develop that hope and faith? It depends on your philosophy of life. And that's why I wrote the book, The Power of Surrender, to really crystallize what your philosophy is. Do you want to be the kind of person who is motivated solely by ego and pushing? Or do you want to be a multifaceted person who is intuitive and can tune into the flow, but also can go out and pursue a dream when you need to? And you have both capacities. You're not just on one note. You have both capacities, and that's what the message of the book is that surrender is not defeat. It's about learning how to tune in to where you're meant to go. And then going for it, but not trying to artificially force things that were not meant to be in your karmic path.
Yeah, and I notice for so many people, and myself included, is when we're stuck in our head trying to figure it out and plan it out and think it out, we are completely shut down to the other signals that the universe might be sending us saying, no, you're supposed to turn left instead of go straight.
Right, but that's why I made the point that when the door isn't open, instead of sitting by that door like a little puppy, waiting for that door to open and just being fixated and obsessed, to back off and tune in and start to be aware of the universe's other signs that are being shown to you at those moments. I mean, that is a much better way to live. So you'll sit at that door forever, and then you'll be rejected if that door isn't meant to open for you.
Oh, believe me, I've done that in my life, sitting and waiting, and it doesn't happen.
Yeah, and it's painful.
Yep.
It's a real painful way to go. And so I'm trying to present another alternative with, what if something isn't meant to be or it's not happening right now? Then you go and pursue other things. Do something else for a while, and then see what happens. But keep following your heart. Keep tuning in to make sure you're on the right soul path for yourself, and it's not just your ego talking.
Before we came on air, Dr. Orloff, I was just talking to a young 20-something-year-old man who's a friend of mine who had been on track to go to law school, and on almost the very eve of entering into law school, and he worked so hard to get there, he really sat down with himself and went, you know what, this is not the time for me to do this. I don't want to do this right now. I want to, instead of doing 2 years of more intensive, I want to take 2 years to really ground in myself and find out who I am. And we were just talking about an hour ago, and I just applaud him for making that choice and listening to himself instead of listening to the outer world. And that's one of the things he said, I really want to be able to live my life from who I am and not who I'm supposed to be.
Oh, absolutely. And he's surrendering to that. He's letting go to that instead of fighting that.
Right.
So he's able to follow his path. And that's very beautiful, as they've, talked to so many people on their deathbed, and they ask them, what is most important to you? What do you wish you could have done differently? And, most of them say, I wish I could have lived a life for myself instead of trying to please everybody else.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
That's a big one.
That's huge. Yep. Yep.
It's huge. Forget about everything but what your heart tells you to do, as long as it's healthy and constructive.
And harms no one.
Yeah, you don't want to go down a destructive, ignorant path, but you do. If your heart tells you, to go in, you want to be a vet. Let's say you really want to be a vet, but your parents want you to be a corporate attorney. You don't want to be a corporate attorney. You want to work with animals. They're not that into animals. It doesn't rank high in their standards of life for some reason. What do you do? What do you do? And then what do you surrender to? And my hope and my goal and what I teach people is to surrender to their hearts. Go be a vet. You can feel with your parents, they'll love you, they'll keep, loving you. But you just find your own mission and your own destiny. You have to, otherwise you're living your life for somebody else and surrendering to other people's values, which may not be your own, which is totally unhealthy and leads to all kinds of problems. I can tell you as a psychiatrist, people come to me with fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, depression. And then when you sort through that, what is it? Sometimes they're living their lives for other people and they have to really reinvent their lives so it's on fire for them. And that means sometimes going against their parents' values or going against society's values. But so be it, You must follow your heart.
Well, and one of the things you talk about in The Power of Surrender is how not to take other people's stuff on, because I know in the past I have done that quite often, where I start stressing and trying to plan my life because I have other people's, I'm not even talking about agendas, I'm talking about energy.
Right.
Other people's negative energy that somehow has glommed on, or I've allowed it to become the burden in my backpack that I walk around with, and I don't even know I'm carrying other people's stuff. I guess that's expectations, right? People's expectation?
It is, but it's more than that for a lot of people. And I'll be talking about this in the workshop on November 7th at the Center for the Heart in Santa Barbara, where we talk about empaths. I'm an empath, so I have a big interest in exploring it. Empaths are very sensitive, intuitive, loving people who have no guard up or no boundaries up or filters up with the world. So they tend to take on the exhaustion and the stress of other people or their partners or their coworkers and take it on into their own bodies. And so it's important to learn how not to do that, how to be very open intuitively and be a loving person as you are, but not take on the angst of the world. A very important life skill, not to surrender to everybody else's pain and stress and take it on in your body. It will only make you unhealthy, depressed, and anxious.
Well, and I think a lot of people will take that on thinking that they're being kind.
Yeah, it's an old idea that to be compassionate, you need to take on the angst of the world. It's the martyr archetype, which doesn't work.
Not anymore.
No, it's not practical. Certainly as a healer myself, if I did that, I wouldn't have any longevity as a healer. I wouldn't be able to help people. And I know very well that I'm able to help people as a healer, as a therapist, by just being there with them and not taking on their stuff, but offering them guidance, shining my light on them, which is ever so helpful. You don't need to be compassionate and take on other people's stuff. You can be 200% compassionate without doing that, and you'll be in better shape.
Yeah.
So it's an old belief to reevaluate.
Right. So then, in the idea of developing surrender as one of your powers that empowers you, how do you do that in regards to like building your business, let's say? Because there does need to be a bit, in my life, people keep saying, well, what's your business plan? I'm like, I don't really have a business plan because I do a lot of surrendering and listening intuitively. But a lot of people want to have that business plan. So how do you use the power of surrender in your business?
Well, I think it's good to have both. I mean, I think it's good to have some kind of plan, a logical, linear plan for what you want. But I think it's also important for you to develop more of a heart-centered consciousness about it so that you can flow with the opportunities as they're presented to you and not be rigidly adhering to that plan.
Mm-hmm.
So it's both. I'm a physician, and I've been trained in linear, logical, analytic thought and scientific reasoning. So that's a very strong part of me. But I also work as an intuitive and as an empath, so I've developed, the intuitive, more flowing, surrendered part of myself. And what I'm suggesting in the book, and for a business and in relationships, is to blend both, to have both and to know when to switch between both. And how do you know when one applies and not another? You know if you're pushing too hard when you start clenching. All right, so you listen to your body signs. So you notice when you're getting exhausted or frustrated, and maybe you're pushing too hard. And if I'm doing that, everybody does that. You just say, all right, I'm doing that. Let me take a few steps back. Let me go meditate and be by the ocean or be in nature for a while and get my center back again. So I could really hear my inner voice and surrender to that. And the inner voice might say, go back to your business plan, and really stick to it. I'm not saying that the analytic and the logical you don't want to surrender to. What I'm saying is you just have to use your intuition, knowing when to surrender to what.
It sounds like finding balance.
Yeah, exactly.
Like you said, the center, being centered within yourself.
Yes, and hearing your inner voice. You have to hear something inside of you that's guiding you. Now, you can go to all the motivational speakers in the world who will get you all revved up and excited about your project. But if you're not tuning in inside to what's right for you, it will fizzle out. You have to hear this, inspiration coming from within. And everyone can do it. This isn't something that's beyond people. But it is something I'm going to be teaching in the workshop on November 7th at the Center for the Heart. How do you tune into your intuition and know what to surrender to? What is your intuition? If I'm exhausted and, tired out from life, what can I do to listen to it, to regroup and go in a direction that is most positive for me?
Well, and another quote from your book, The Power of Surrender, you said a key to surrender is that it comes from your intuition, not just your linear mind. And the more surrendered you are, the more intuitive and open to a deeper flow of knowledge you will be. So it sounds like the more surrendered we can get, then the more we're able to find or listen to the answers or the solution.
Exactly. That's exactly right. Because when I tune into my intuition, what I do is I take a few breaths, I get very quiet, I go inward, and my jabbering mind, I just let it float by like clouds in the sky, all those thoughts and to-do lists, and I refocus on my breath, and I pose a question, shall I go forward with this career decision? And then I sit in meditation, and I wait for any ahas for any gut feelings, for any flashes or knowings. And then I note those, I write them down, and I see how they apply to my answer.
Mm.
So it's intuitive, it's a process, what you can go through in order to find intuitive answers. But I want to underline, it's not about thinking or forcing or analyzing. It's about posing a question to the still space inside, or let's say your higher self, spirit, higher consciousness, whatever you want to call it, and then learning to trust that you're going to be getting answers from that. That they're answers that come from something other than your mind. And that's really hard for a lot of people who have linear traditional training. But I'm here to say that if you really want to tap into all your inner wisdom, you've got to surrender to that and explore it and begin to get experience with knowing that it exists, because it does. Not just the world just doesn't revolve around your mind. The brain is multifaceted. I mean, there's so much unknown about the brain. We only use, a very small percentage of our brain. And so we're capable of all kinds of non-local phenomena, such as intuition, or sometimes seeing into the future, or getting flashes about people, reading energy. We can do all that, but it doesn't come from the mind. And that's what's hard for people to adjust to, because they've never surrendered to these other aspects of themselves, which I'm presenting in the book to kind of say, here it is, enjoy it, explore it, see how much larger than you ever thought you would be.
Well, and in the book you talk about there's 3 stages to surrendering, and the first one is resistance, second one acceptance, and then letting go. And I always stop at resistance. I find I fight and fight and fight within myself about whatever the situation is. And that's my resistance, is getting into that battle until I'm so tired fighting myself that I finally accept, okay, it is what it is. And now I just got to let it go.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's normal that resistance comes up, but perhaps one time you might try an experiment of not fighting it and just bypassing that, just with one thing, and letting go, and then seeing what happens. And I think you'll be pleasantly surprised that the positive feedback that comes back will reinforce that behavior in the future.
As soon as you said that, Dr. Orloff, that I had a pit of fear start in my stomach. I was like, wait a minute, how can I, because what you're inviting me to do is undo the way I do. But, so how do you overcome the fear when you're in resistance? It's almost like the resistance is because you're afraid, right?
Well, but you're an adventurous, and you do like to adventure and explore. And you can look at that as an opportunity to explore a new way of being. You can do it in a tiny area that isn't going to have a huge repercussion in your life. But just experiment. You've got to take risks a little bit, and explore if you want to, to heal. You have to go beyond your comfort zone a little bit and just tolerate that fear or resistance and do it anyways.
Okay, so here's another quote from your book that caught my attention, of course, because it's about resistance. You said, try stretching past the border of your resistance toward the degrees of trust you've never experienced, the serenity you've never allowed in, then reach further. I love that. Because
thank you. Yeah,
I love that. Not only is it poetic, we're going past boundaries or horizons that we haven't experienced in that place of surrender.
That's what makes it so exciting.
So let's talk about one of the things you have in your book is identifying people that you're around that are draining your energy.
Right.
And then it also says surrender unhealthy habits of how you cope with those people.
Correct.
So first of all, how do you identify the people that are draining you, except for the fact that you're drained? But I mean, some people don't recognize that they're being drained.
Yeah. Well, it's important to notice who feeds your energy and who drains you in your life, to take an inventory. This will be part of the workshop on November 7th, at the center for the heart, how to identify the energy vampires in your life and what to do about it. Now, you have to be really methodical about this. You can't just leave it to chance. And so in the Power of Surrender, I talk about the different types of energy vampires, such as the narcissist, the me person who lacks empathy. Narcissists, full-blown narcissists, have what researchers call an empathy deficient disorder. Very important. Yeah, very important to realize, all you compassionate empaths out there who are attracted to narcissists because they're so charming and intelligent. And
I'm raising my hand, Dr. Orloff, yes.
Yeah, and so you actually get to know them.
Yeah.
You don't want to fall in love with a narcissist. You want to try and avoid them as much as possible. And if you're in a relationship with one, you need to practice some of the strategies I talk about in the book, such as lowering your expectations and not looking to them for love and unconditional compassion. If they can't give it. I'm sorry to, inform people of that. It's always upsetting to people to realize that, but I've treated hundreds and hundreds of people who have been involved with narcissists, and it's just not going to happen that you could transform them. The only thing that I've ever seen that works with narcissists somewhat is if they happen to have the good fortune to be a drug addict or alcoholic and go into a 12-step program. And 12-step programs are based on service work. That's part of that. So being of service and going to prisons and going and feeding the homeless and going to hospital panels and talking to new alcoholics, that's part of recovery from alcoholism. So in the 12 steps, and so narcissists are forced to be of service, and that does open their heart.
Well, and that circles back to what you said earlier in our conversation about developing self-esteem by giving, by being of service.
That's a big part of my philosophy, in terms of how to live life, is being of service to others, not being a doormat, not being codependent, but helping whenever you can, in little ways, in big ways. Hold the door for somebody in the elevator. Instead of being in such a hurry, you want to block them out, and leave them standing there, leaving a little old lady standing there as you're rushing to get to your appointment. Now really open the door. And what that does, and you'll be very surprised by this, is that it opens your heart and it gives you energy. And when I'm feeling my worst and I don't feel like helping anybody, I do it anyways, because I know it will be as therapeutic for me as it will be somebody else.
Right. And like you said, heart opening, yes.
Yeah, heart opening. So when your heart opens, you begin to feel better. That's a general rule. And even if someone wrote me that, she's going through such a hard time and, she is just too burnt out to help anybody. And I know that feeling. But even in little ways, you can do little help, and that could serve your own health by doing that.
So then, Dr. Orloff, also then, if we are being of service to others, that it sounds to me, as you were just talking, that it kind of feeds the surrender muscle, almost like a circulation thing of, well, if I'm giving, then I can surrender more, and because the surrendering is that place of it goes hand in hand with giving. It sounds like, feels like.
It really, to me, it does. For my philosophy, my spiritual path is one of Taoism, and Taoism is a very simple philosophy that honors nature, subtle energies, the power of the heart, and being of service. Mm-hmm. And so it's a primary part of my principles of living, and that's what I communicate and share in the Power of Surrender. And I found that it's an incredibly beautiful lifestyle when you can have those priorities set. And so part of surrendering, even if you're in a terrible job, you hate your job and you can't change it right now, you can still be of service to that, let's say that FedEx guy that comes in, in a rush, and, smile at him, tell him what a good job he's doing. That's a way of being of service. In any little ways, no matter what bad situation you're in, you can always shift the energy by helping others, and that's part of surrender.
It sounds like it would be something that would help to get you out of a depression as well if you're feeling depressed. Or
Well, I always try and get my depressed patients to be of service. It's very hard. I mean, if they're just a little depressed, it's easier. But, with a major depression, it's very hard to even move or think or eat or sleep. So, I work with them on being kind to themselves, giving to themselves, just saying sweet thoughts instead of, terrible thoughts.
that's a challenge right there.
It's all a challenge. But, my philosophy of life is that we're here to develop our souls. That's why we're here. And emotions and all life experience is meant to do that. So if we look at even the most trying experiences such as depression or breaking up a relationship which just tears your heart up, or losing a job or gaining a job, whatever it is, they're all experiences to help you develop your heart and help you surrender fears and negativities. I wrote another book called Emotional Freedom, which deals with how to transform negative emotions into something more positive. So that's kind of a companion book for the power of surrender. But everything is a spiritual challenge. And yes, life is difficult. This is not an enlightened planet. It isn't. But you have the opportunity to evolve. You have the opportunity, whatever happens to you, to make positive choices and to take the high road and to evolve yourself instead of staying stuck in the victim, instead of, just wallowing in something. Really make the decision to do it another way, to tune into your intuition, to take good care of yourselves, to love one another as best you can, to be of service. All of that, if you have your priorities straight in life, it helps. But it's about living life in a different way. And, you might have to be the one to shift the pattern. When I write about surrendering, one of the things that's so important to surrender a lot of times is the need to be right.
Oh, good grief. I hate that part, Dr. Orloff.
Well, it's so liberating, though. I mean, that's the one thing that keeps people stuck in anger is their need to be right. And I love letting people be right. It makes them so happy. I'm telling you, it makes them, nobody lets anybody be right. So when you can give that to someone and say, that's really brilliant. You are right. And you think it's radical to see how happy that makes them. And I want to give that to people. And sometimes if somebody isn't right, and you really disagree with them, at least you can give them, that's a thought. I'll think about it a little while. You make a good point, and I want to consider it, as opposed to, you're a jerk. Why did you bring that up? You have no understanding of me. That kind of response.
Right. And I have noticed that it seems that a lot of people have been conditioned, if you will, to think that a conversation is about arguing two different points of view so that you discern who's right. And that's not a real conversation.
No, that's more of a debate.
Yeah. But I've witnessed this so often where people get into a dialogue and both two different people are arguing their point, and they're not even listening to the other person to begin with. But this idea of allowing the other person to be right as a gift that you're giving them, I think is brilliant. I'm going to practice that this week.
Yeah, everyone try it. I mean, even if you don't want to. The ego, of course, doesn't want to do any of this. But the heart does. You see, so what I'm suggesting in the power of surrender is that you try coming from your heart sometimes and not just your ego. The ego always needs to be right. It hates the idea it's not right. But the heart loves to give the other person, the experience of being right, because it's so much fun to see how they see.
Well, and you talk about that the practice of surrender, or the power of surrender, is something that brings more joy and more love and more happiness into your life, and as opposed to I think the way we were trained up, where you're losing something, you're relinquishing something.
Right, and part of the book is devoted to surrendering to play and surrendering to joy and surrendering to happiness. A lot of people can't allow themselves to be happy. All they want to do is clench and work and problem solve and be in pain and worry. but what if you didn't have to do that all the time? What if you can just surrender and take a breath and go, I'm enjoying the sunlight. I'm enjoying my children. I'm enjoying my friends. Isn't this fantastic, this day, this moment? To be able to surrender like that and actually have a good time. It's hard for people, ironically, to surrender to pleasure.
It
and
is.
Of course, I know there's a chapter in the book on sexuality, but pleasure goes way beyond just sex. It's about having the pleasure of every breath, of every moment, of every, taking advantage of everything, feeling the wind on your face and the sun on your shoulders and, the sweet touch of a friend on your back or whatever. It's about living life that way instead of, the opposite of someone who isn't surrendered, who's clenched, who's forcing, who's worried, whose posture is stooped, who never has time to go to the gym because they're always working so hard or go to yoga class. So, who do you want to be? That's the question I'm raising.
Well, and that, it's funny that you're talking about that because, like I said earlier, for me, the practice of surrender has been in the forefront of my life for the last several months. And one of the things that I open to is also being open to receive, just like what you're saying, receiving the good, receiving the compliments, receiving the love, receiving the sunlight into my life. And I did not realize how closed off I had become until I started practicing this. And it does take a conscious effort at times to be open to receive the love that's coming from someone else.
And then savoring it for more than a second.
Right. Instead of going, okay, thanks for the compliment now. Let's get on.
Right, on to the next problem.
Right. But to sit with it, to really sit with another human being who's loving you, who's giving you their time or their attention, whatever that is that place of exquisite joy.
Yes, and wonder, and wow, this is so amazing. Wow, I'm not going to forget how amazing this is, and and really get happy from that.
And what I notice too is that when I receive it, when I'm being open and receptive, the person that's giving to me is so happy too.
Oh yeah.
So it's like a win-win for everybody.
Oh, it's so good when you could vibe back and forth like that and share loving energy. It's so exciting. I mean, your life will pass you by at some point. The final surrender is that of, death, of passing over. So we don't have unlimited time here. And certainly as you age, you get more aware of that. So you want to live your life well. And the book is meant to ask yourself questions. How do I want to live my life? And what do I want to surrender to? How do I want to, craft my moments here and live my moments? And then it will be gone. I can guarantee you that. But those who have a fear of death, don't worry, because the final chapter will help you get over it and surrender that too, which is so important to really be able to celebrate your life now.
Well, and I know that there's lots of people that are in those maybe ending times, and that's where the resistance comes up again, right? For so many people. I shoulda, coulda, yeah, and I shoulda, coulda, woulda, and why didn't I? The regrets show up, and the resistance can build. My parents are in their early 80s, and I can see it already where there's resistance to dying. There's a resistance to facing death, which I guess is a normal human experience.
Yeah, but it's something to mindfully explore. And, for those of you who are brave, you can do a meditation that I suggest in the Surrender to Death and the Afterlife chapter on inviting death in now when you're alive, because I believe, and I know, because I've done this meditation so many times, that it's safe and creative, and you get a sense of what the other side is like, and then you really know there's nothing to be afraid of. But you can invite that. Death is an energy. You can invite it in now and get a sense of it if you're very, very brave. And it's transformative. I used to come home after a long day working in the hospital and just do this death meditation or I could just invite death in and be in that energy, and it's so relaxing and so calming. It's creative. It's a very creative energy that's with you from the beginning of the time you're on Earth, and then it will take you away. But it's not this dark, horrible thing that people describe. But the only way to really know that is through your intuition. You can't think your way there. You can't debate your way there. You have to tune into it and have the direct experience through the energy and surrendering to that. And then when you see you're perfectly okay, and not even okay, but you're even better, then your mind begins to change about the final passage.
Oh, I think that's wonderful. I will absolutely have to try that because there is a place of curiosity for me too.
Yeah, I know. That's what I was alluding to before, the adventurous in you.
Yeah, and so many people are, because the fear runs them, whatever the fear is, the fear of whatever, and I guess ultimately it's the fear of dying, but that people don't want to look at possibilities or choices or explore what could be more of their life, even if you're at the ending time of your life. My parents are in such fear about the ending time of their lives that talk about clenching, man, the control and all of that they're trying to maintain when it's not possible to control a lot of those things anymore.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's why it's you can just love them, just totally love them madly. That will help. It will help soften them. Just tell them, how much they mean to you. And just keep loving them. That will help them to relax. But for everyone else listening who maybe is a little bit younger, you can start practicing some of these surrender principles now, so that when you approach that time, it won't be a time of fear for you or clenching.
So, Dr. Orloff, I just want everybody to know, Dr. Judith Orloff is doing a workshop up in Santa Barbara on Saturday, November 7th from 2 to 5 p.m. And it is based on her book, this book we're talking about, The Power of Surrender. And at the center of the heart is, you can actually call 805-964-4861 or go to info@centeroftheheart.com to find out how you sign up for the workshop. This sounds like it's going to be a very deep workshop, Dr. Orloff.
It is. Anyone ready for change, and you want to let go of energy vampires, you want to be able to not absorb the energy of others and pick up the stress of others, if you want to be able to tune into your intuition. No, it's going to be really intensive, and we'll talk about all that. And I just want to say that the information is also on my website, which is Judith Orloff, ORLOFF.com.
Awesome. And there's another piece, because we just have a few more minutes. There's another piece I want to talk about of surrendering, because I saw it in this list, surrendering into success. And that seems to be a challenge for a lot of people.
Yes, and redefining what success means. Now, if you redefine success first and foremost as an inside job, in terms of you feeling successful inside of yourself, in terms of the efforts you're making, or the dedication you have, or the type of person you are, and your belief and faith in trust and intuition in the heart, you have that going for you. That's going to motor you all the way to success. But if you first have to have that, then you can go for the external success. But if all you have is a striving and pushing for external success, even if you get it, it won't make you happy, because you won't have that inner component to be able to hold the happiness.
So, it's so interesting, because that's exactly the conversation I had with this young man before you and I came on air today, was that he had decided he wanted to connect with himself first, as opposed to chasing the American dream, if you will. And which I think is brilliant at such an early age. But So in the 20 years that you've been practicing psychiatry, have you seen a shift of people moving from this outwardly driven accumulation and accomplishing modality to an inner, let me know myself first? Or does this seem to be a new thing?
Well, no, I think, amongst a certain population, people who are open to mind, body, and spirit and alternative ways of healing, yes, most definitely. And, some of the younger generation are just sick and tired of of worshiping wealth and greed and not being honest and all of that. They just had it with that, and so there is a shift taking place where people are prioritizing other things, like your friend who made the decision to go inside and find himself and connect with himself before he chooses a career. I think there are less people choosing careers on the basis of what their parents want and more, being able to tune in to what they really want. But it's a process, and I think human beings change very slowly, and I'm grateful for any even little bit of baby change that happens.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because my son is 21, and among his group of friends, what you just described of the younger generation, it's almost like they came in hardwired to know themselves first. Whereas my generation and the older generation, the baby boomers, we were, I don't think we even came in with a computer chip, if you will, of know myself first. I think it was just, get into the daily grind and rut. That's the way it had always been, and that's the way it needs to be. And it's almost like the last couple of generations that have shown up on the planet, to me, are about shifting the awareness to the inner life as opposed to the outer life. Whereas I had to work so hard for this. Yeah.
Balance of inner and outer. It's not one or the other. I think people tend to polarize. But the surrender is surrender to all the aspects of yourself. You have so many different sides. You're not just one thing. You're not just a lawyer. You're not just a doctor. You're not just a mother or a father, or, a grandmother. You are a human being undergoing a spiritual experience here. And if you look at it that way, the sky is the limit for what you have to learn and grow and expand. So, don't just look at yourself as one role, because when you do, it just limits you too much. You want to surrender to your full, beautiful, amazing, multifaceted self. Everybody who's listening qualifies for this.
Right.
Nobody is excluded from what I'm talking about, no matter what kind of low self-esteem you might have at this given moment.
So then, do you recommend to people to, as part of this idea of developing your power of surrender, to meditate?
Oh, definitely. Meditation is one of my key practices in my life, and it's about closing your eyes and tuning into your heart and letting go of the talk, the chatter, monkey mind, as the Buddhists call it, to be able to find yourself and spirit. Absolutely. I teach all my patients to meditate. I recommend, meditation in my books. It's one of my main tools. I couldn't live without it. I couldn't imagine life without meditation. It would be very hard.
Yeah, I have a similar feeling about that too. My life, it feels more centered and balanced, if you will, more on track in quotation marks, when my meditation practice is thriving. And when I fall off that meditation wagon, everything gets very wonky and wobbly.
Yeah, and more clenching, a lot
more clenching. And my jaw, my hands, my shoulders go up again. I'm not in the moment. I'm not relaxed.
Exactly. Well, meditation is a beautiful practice. I usually meditate at midnight every night when everything is so quiet, and I open my windows and I hear the ocean in the distance, and I sit at my altar with the candles lit and the incense burning, and I just close my eyes and bow and connect to myself and sit there in silence.
I applaud you for just being up at midnight to do all that.
Yeah, I always seem to be. I try not to be, but I always seem to be up at midnight.
But there is something about creating that quiet time for yourself. At least I find where there's no, like when nobody's up, nobody else is awake in the household. I often found
Right.
when my son was little that if I got up that hour before everybody else started to hit the floor, I would find that centered piece of just serenity and calmness to
Yeah,
get through the day.
Yeah, it's very comforting if you have the luxury to do that. It's very, very comforting to, have that quiet and no demands because they're all sleeping or, out. The city is quieted down and everyone's asleep except for you when you're meditating, and it's just a wonderful feeling.
Yeah, it is. So I've been talking to Dr. Judith Orloff. She is the author of The Power of Surrender, Let Go and Energize Your Relationships, Success, and Well-Being. And Dr. Judith is having a workshop on Saturday, November 7th from 2 to 5 at Center of the Heart up in Santa Barbara. And for more information, you can go to info@centeroftheheart.com. And Dr. Judith, tell everybody your site again.
My website is drjudithorloff.com. And I just want to also mention that I have a Facebook group for empaths and highly sensitive people. For those who want support for that, just go on my site or go on Facebook for the empath support community.
Oh, I'm so grateful that you mentioned that. I think I will be checking that out shortly.
Oh, okay, great.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much for all the work that you do in the world, all the good that you're promoting, Dr. Judith. And I just want to end with, and so it is, namaste.